Hi everyone, I'm going to talk about the Sony A7 III today. First, the comparison of photos taken by A7 III and D750. Secondly, the comparison of ISO test between the two. Thirdly, the dynamic range. Fourthly, the first impression of A7 III. Fifthly, the problem I encountered with A7 III. And last, I'll be answering to a question. In my last post, I mentioned about selling my D750, but wanted to compare the photos of the two cameras before selling it. Let's see how these two cameras capture the scenes and how they are shown in the photos. Just want you to see it as an example, as colors vary depending on the lenses. These are the lenses I used. I've laid out two cameras as shown. How the light is captured is uneven due to different positioning of the cameras. After taking the pictures in RAW, I developed through each of Sony and Nikon profile by using Lightroom. In Nikon, it's known as picture control. In Sony, creative control. I'll display the data and which profile used on top of the screen. And I used alt-white balance. It was cloudy that day, so you can see how the alt-white balance works. First picture. I've focused the Sony logo. Overall, it feels like A7 III has bluish tone and D750 has yellowish tone. On actual sight, the impression was somewhat in between, and the black is very different. A7 III's black looks rather whitish, whereas Nikon is more natural. Next, the focus point is the middle B of the word barbecue. A7 III looks sharper. And again, color tone of A7 III feels bluish as opposed to D750 more yellowish. However, look at the number 75. D750's blue is stronger. I don't see any other major differences, do you? Next, focus point is on the flower on the right. A7 III is obviously yellowish. Next, look at the skin tone here. The skin tone on A7 III is yellowish and D750 more pinkish. Which skin tone do you prefer? I preferred the pinkish skin tone on D750 because of its healthier look. But after a while, it didn't bother me as much. Press which skin tone do you like on the choice box. And face detection autofocus was used on both cameras. A7 III certainly has more clear face line. Next is the ISO test. How far do you usually increase the ISO? Around 6400 is my maximum. I hardly bring up to 10,000. No matter how high the performance of the camera is, A7 III can expand to 204,800. That massive amount is rarely used. So 25,200 is what I have set today. As you could see, there were hardly any differences. Next, the dynamic range. As I am a raw shooter, I always shoot with underexposure to prevent from blown out highlights. Like in this photo, I set it underexposure on purpose, not to blow out highlights of the snow over the window. By doing so, I ended up blocking up the shadow of the objects in the front or the window frame. This is a good example of dynamic range. I increase the shadow all the way up and see how it brings back the information within. So much information were behind the blocked up shadows, but you can also find noise on this area. Next, the first impression of A7 III. Personally speaking, there isn't much of a surprise. This is not my first full-frame sensor camera, and there isn't much difference in pixels between them. It's just what I had expected. It's been a month since getting A7 III and the lenses, but have only been using it for 2-3 weeks. I was busy for a while and I had to send my A7 III for a repair due to a certain operational default, or at least that's what I thought. So I can only make a flimsy comment. I'll talk about the defaults later. The body is as compact as X-T2, but the lens tends to be much bigger on full-frame sensor cameras. It's not for someone whose priority is lightweight. By the way, I bought these two lenses. The zoom lens is 663 grams. Not very light, but I think my choice was correct. When I use this lens, I tend to unconsciously use the focal length between 50 and 105mm because I love middle telephoto range, and it also covers wide angle at the same time. 55mm f1.8 is compact and light. I like its expressive coloring and depiction. Within the grouping of mirrorless camera, as far as the usability is concerned, my personal preference would be X-T2. I've been using Sony point-and-shoot camera RX100 since last October, so it took me less to get used to the essence of Sony camera. If it was the first Sony camera, I would have had some time getting used to it. Because not only for camera products, but also any products from Sony tend to have slightly individual usability. It's not a big deal, but I can't get used to the positioning of slot 1, slot 2 in SD cards. Slot 1 is below slot 2, but my presumption would be that slot 1 should be placed on top of slot 2. I guess the more I use it, the more manageable it becomes. From that perspective, I like the fact that with A7 III, you can register frequently used function in the function menu, and the customized buttons are plentiful. And as expected, the battery is long-lasting, even if it's mirrorless. Even with a half day of shooting outside, I never seem to need my extra battery pack. Since April 4th, Lightroom was corresponded with A7 III RAW. Compared to D750 RAW process, A7 III RAW process has a tone I'm trying to achieve, like this one that was posted on Instagram, for example. My intention was to enhance the yellowishness light of the evening sun. I formatted Sony Deep Profile first, then adjusted the details. It was quite a simple task with less procedures. Next, trouble with A7 III. I had to send my A7 III for a repair center just after getting it, but it turned out that there was nothing wrong with it. But I'm going to show you what I thought of as malfunction. This was a symptom. Take a look. Black shadow like vertical lines. I used silent shutter mode while I was shooting in the quiet surrounding. This silent shutter mode was something I was very curious about, and so it was one of the first functions I used as soon as I opened the camera. This was also the first functions to register in the customized button. It's very useful when used to prevent from offending the ear in very quiet surroundings. I was trying to figure out how they could occur. I tried to change a few settings and found that they appear only when I set it to the silent shutter mode. By the way, this is the same picture without the silent mode. There are no black horizontal lines. So I inquired Sony store and explained the situation, but the cause was unknown, and the camera had to be sent to the repair center. Then I received the call the next day. The inspection report was that there is actually nothing wrong with the camera. It is so-called flicker. There is actually a cautioned section in the manual where silent shutter mode is written. It's supposed to be a flickering in the light. The solution apparently is take the shot slower than 1/50th shutter speed under the flickering light. If I were to take the shot slower than 1/50th shutter speed, I wouldn't be able to capture a moment of dancing. Well, if black lines appear, I just need to stop using silent shutter mode, so it's not a big deal. Next, the question most asked at my last video and Instagram recently was, how do you separate the use of X-T2 and A7 III? I didn't buy these cameras specifically depending on the situation. I decide which camera to use depending on the mood I'm in, or may even bring both out. For now, as I had just bought the A7 III, this is the one I use the most. So this is it for now. Please press good if you like my video and don't forget to turn on notification on Instagram. See you soon at the next video. Bye!